Hey y'all, recently I was involved with a phone call with a relative and a very basic argument for the existence of God came up. At the time, I had just finished making my last video, which was on Euthyphro's Dilemma, and I was wondering what my next video was going to be about. Well, whenever I got this phone call and she mentioned this particular argument, it pretty much sealed the deal for the next video. This argument is known as Pascal's wager. And here we go. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is the background of this game of chance. The second thing will be about the high stakes of the wager, and finally we're going to critique it to see if it actually holds up. Which, yeah, if you were playing a game and you had an opportunity to maximize your gains by merely accepting a claim as true, would you do it? By holding this belief, you open up an opportunity for an eternal reward, and you risk losing so little that it's basically nothing. By not holding the belief, you risk losing everything, and you risk gaining so little that it's also practically nothing. So why would you take the risk of not believing? Don't let my question fool you. At first it may sound pretty simple, but it's actually a little bit more complicated than it leads you to believe. A few hundred years ago, French physicist, mathematician, and religious philosopher Blaise Pascal was writing down a few of his thoughts, one of which dealt with assessing the gains and losses of a belief in God. Will an examination of the possible outcomes of belief versus non-belief allow you to beat the odds when it comes to the gamble of where you may spend eternity? So, does it hold up? Not quite. Here are a few of the reasons as to why this argument doesn't hold up. Now, some of these I was able to figure out by myself, however some of them I was not, but all of these reasons are listed online at rationalwiki.org. I'll be sure to post a link in the description below so that way you can check it out, because one, I want to give credit where it's due, and also I want you to have access to all the resources that I have access to. With that said, let the critique begin. One assumption that Pascal's wager relies on is that someone can change their beliefs at will and without supporting evidence. Let that sink in. Think about it for a little bit. Could you, as an individual who believes a claim such as, I don't know, that the earth revolves around the sun, could you up and just change that belief on a whim to say something to the extent of, maybe the sun revolves around the earth? Could you do that without reason and actually truly hold that belief? Even if you had some sort of desire to truly want to hold that belief, it's doubtful that you could. With the exception of beliefs that are, say, self-evident, such as I exist and I can experience the world. Most of the beliefs that we hold are unwilled. We can't just decide to believe in them. They have to be justified. Another thing to think about when it comes to Pascal's wager is, are these beliefs legitimate? So, are you worshiping because you truly believe it? Are you trying to avoid a punishment? Or are you just trying to get a reward out of it? Are you trying to, say, pull a fast one on this God that's in question? Because if it's an all-knowing God, then it will be able to detect your deceitfulness. And if you're being deceitful, might the God punish you for doing such a thing? What if you're well aware of the claimed commands of this God, and you merely carry them out just so you can benefit from them? If that's the case, then you're doing this in your own self-interest, and that can have a few undesired consequences. Going off that last topic, what if your willingness to obey the God takes priority over actually being a good person? For instance, what if the God actually values your obedience over treating others with respect? A few problems arise here. What if, in order to advance your worship, you have to inflict harm on one of your peers? This idea suggests that significantly evil people can get into heaven and avoid hell mainly because they just believe. We know that there are bad people out there, and unfortunately, some of these bad people actually hold a belief in God. So, according to Pascal's wager, they can be granted entrance into heaven. And if an atheist such as myself were to, for some reason, find myself in heaven, I could potentially be surrounded by these people. So that doesn't really entice me to want to believe. I wouldn't want to put myself in that type of environment. Let's talk about actually having the correct religion. The most common objection to Pascal's wager, and the one that I actually use the most, is basically How do you know that you have the right religion? There are many different belief systems out there, such as Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam. How do you know that you've picked the correct religion, the one true religion? But to go a little bit more in depth, some of those religions actually have denominations, and some of them have many denominations that actually conflict with one another. So which denomination is the right one? Some of these denominations are mutually exclusive of one another, and many of them have different practices and sometimes conflicting practices. In short, not every religion can be right. However, it is possible for them all to be wrong. Let's reverse things for a little bit. Drawing off of the previous idea that there are many religions out there and you have to choose the correct one, let's say that you did choose the correct one. However, what if the God is actually testing you? We can look at this in the sense of, if you believe something on bad evidence, what if you're actually punished for that instead of rewarded? For example, this God could value critical thinking, skepticism, and evidence-based beliefs over faith. This scenario allows for you to still hold ideas such as the Bible is divinely inspired or whatever text that you're referring to. However, these are actually just tests, and if you were to believe them, it's actually sending yourself to hell. Oddly enough, this type of scenario would give a win-win situation for the atheist and a lose-lose situation for the theist. Let's give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that you've chosen the right religion, chosen the right denomination of that religion, and that you are now standing in heaven. You've made it this far. But how do you know that the God is going to be consistent with its reward? How do you know that it's not going to change its mind? We have a few examples of this actually in the Bible. Adam and Eve, they had free rides. However, circumstances changed, and they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Satan once lived in heaven, and then he got kicked out. There's no guarantee that your reward or punishment would actually be eternal in this sense. So to wrap up this video, all bets are off with Pascal's wager. Faking a belief in God isn't exactly a good idea, especially if that God cares about you being honest. Just be good for goodness sake. It's what you should be doing anyway. And if there is an all-powerful and all-good God that's worthy of worship and it desires your belief, then it can and should provide the evidence necessary to obtain your belief. And that's about it. Be sure to check out the description below for relevant links that I talked about earlier. They can help to further your understanding of the wager. So with that said, I will see you next time.